Passengers hurriedly wheeled their suitcases, checked their tickets, and chatted animatedly. Among the crowd, a well-dressed black man in a tailored suit, carrying a sleek leather bag, approached the security checkpoint. "Sir, step aside, please." The voice cut through the ambient noise. Marcus Richardson stopped in his tracks, his gaze briefly sweeping across the throng of travelers, continuing through security without issue. He let out a slow breath, telling himself he had seen this play out before, too many times. But today, he was not just another traveler. "Is there a problem?" His voice remained calm. "Just a routine check, standard procedure," the TSA officer replied, his tone void of emotion. The name on his badge read Brentwood. Marcus pressed his lips together momentarily, but kept his composure. Slowly, he reached into his wallet, pulled out his ID, and placed it firmly in front of the officer. "I am the Director of Homeland Security." Silence. Brentwood stared at the ID, then back at Marcus, eyes narrowing slightly as if searching for a reason to dismiss the truth staring him in the face. "IDs can be faked," Brentwood said, his voice laced with skepticism. Marcus raised an eyebrow, not surprised. "If you have any doubts, you can call my office. They will confirm my identity immediately." But Brentwood didn't make the call. Instead, he motioned to another officer. "Check his bag," he ordered. Marcus's grip on the leather handle of his carry-on tightened. He scanned the area. White businessmen continued past security unbothered. Families on vacation, children clinging to their parents, were waved through without delay. "You're making a big mistake," Marcus said, his voice steady. Brentwood smirked. "Just following standard procedure, Director." The cold click of metal filled the air. Handcuffs. A sharp gasp came from somewhere in the crowd. A few travelers froze in place. Others instinctively pulled out their phones to record the scene. Marcus inhaled deeply, keeping his posture firm, his expression unreadable. "You've just made a very serious mistake." The handcuffs locked around his wrists, their metallic clang reverberating through the crowded airport terminal. Travelers paused mid-step. Some turned to watch, others lowered their heads and hurried away, unwilling to get involved. Some lifted their phones, already recording what they sensed would become national news. Marcus Richardson stood still, his face calm, but a storm brewed beneath the surface. He had spent his life breaking through barriers, pushing against discrimination at every turn. Yet here he was, shackled like a common criminal. Even as Director of Homeland Security, he was still just another black man in the eyes of these officers. "Move forward," Brentwood commanded, his tone as indifferent as if he were processing luggage, not a human being. Marcus took a measured breath, adjusted his stance, and walked forward, not with shame, not with submission, but with purpose. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him rattle. A white woman in a tailored business suit hesitated, then leaned toward the man next to her, whispering something. Nearby, a young man near the coffee kiosk raised his phone higher, recording. "What's going on?" A middle-aged woman muttered to a nearby TSA officer. "Fake credentials," the officer answered casually, not even bothering to lower his voice. Marcus almost laughed. Fake credentials? Did they truly believe he forged his title as the Director of Homeland Security? As he walked through the security area, his eyes caught sight of a group of white travelers, laughing, chatting, breezing past security without a second glance. Not a single one of them had been randomly selected. He turned his gaze back to Brentwood, his voice measured but unwavering. "You could verify my identity with one phone call. It would take 30 seconds, but you chose not to. Why?" Brentwood didn't respond immediately. His eyes flickered for the briefest moment before he turned away and walked ahead. Marcus exhaled through his nose. He already knew the answer. Inside a small, windowless security room, the stark fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the cold metal table. A younger TSA officer, lean, freckled, and red-haired, meticulously searched through Marcus's carry-on with exaggerated precision, as if expecting to uncover some hidden contraband. His name tag read Dawson. Unlike Brentwood, his demeanor wasn't openly hostile, but he wasn't going to question orders either. "Where are you headed?" Dawson asked, still rifling through Marcus's bag with deliberate precision. Marcus crossed his arms, though the handcuffs made the motion slightly awkward. "I have a keynote speech at the Homeland Security Conference in Chicago." His voice remained steady. "I'm the featured speaker." Dawson hesitated, then glanced at Brentwood for direction. Brentwood didn't say a word, just gave a slight nod, a silent order to continue. "Why were you flagged as suspicious?" Dawson asked. Marcus arched an eyebrow, his sharp gaze meeting Dawson's uncertain one. "That's a question I'd like answered myself." Tension tightened the air in the room. Dawson looked back at Brentwood as if waiting for guidance. Brentwood, arms folded, leaned against the wall, exuding an air of smug confidence. "You're under investigation for impersonating a federal official," Brentwood finally declared. Marcus let out a short laugh. "If I were impersonating someone, do you really think I'd choose to impersonate the Director of Homeland Security?" His tone was almost amused. "Do you even understand the level of vetting required for this position?" No one answered. Marcus looked down at his handcuffs, then met Brentwood's gaze head-on. "I'm giving you one last chance to fix this." His voice was calm but carried undeniable weight. "Call and verify my identity. Right now, or I promise you, you will regret this." Brentwood smirked. "You don't intimidate me, Mr. Richardson." "No, I don't," Marcus said, his tone growing colder. "But your career might not survive this day." The atmosphere in the small interrogation room grew suffocating, the tension thick as steel wire pulled to its breaking point. Brentwood kept his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Dawson hesitated, clearly conflicted, but unwilling to challenge his superior. Marcus, though restrained, remained the most composed person in the room. "I'll say it again," he repeated, each syllable precise. "Call and verify my identity. Right now." But Brentwood simply shook his head, the corners of his lips curling into a condescending smirk. "We have our protocols," he said, "and I don't think someone like you gets to give orders here." "Someone like you." The word struck with an all-too-familiar sting. Marcus had heard variations of that phrase his entire life. It wasn't about tone, it was about meaning. "You don't belong here, you don't have authority. I control the situation, not you." A slow burn ignited in Marcus's chest, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. Anger wouldn't serve him here. "You really don't understand how serious this is, do you?" Marcus asked, his patience thinning. Brentwood shrugged. "Like I said, we have protocols." The door burst open. A woman in her 50s, streaks of silver in her dark hair, strode in, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She carried the kind of authority that needed no announcement. The nameplate on her blazer read, "Karen Chen, Chief of Airport Security." "What the hell is going on here?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Brentwood blinked, caught off guard by his superior's sudden appearance. He wasn't expecting her so soon. "We're investigating a possible case of federal identity fraud," Brentwood said, quickly shifting his posture, trying to maintain control of the situation. Chen's gaze flicked to Marcus, then down to the Homeland Security ID on the table. She picked it up, flipping it over in her hands before locking eyes with Marcus. "You're Marcus Richardson?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Yes, and I think you'll want to order these cuffs off, now." Brentwood moved as if to interject, but Chen held up a single hand. She didn't look at him. She was still looking at Marcus. Then, without another word, she pulled out her phone and dialed. The call lasted exactly 10 seconds. When she hung up, her face had lost all color. She slowly set her phone down and turned to Brentwood. "Uncuff him, right now." Brentwood froze. His face reddened instantly. "But ma'am, I was just—" "Now, Brentwood." Chen cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. Brentwood clenched his jaw, visibly seething, but he had no choice. He stepped forward, keys jingling, and unlocked the cuffs from Marcus's wrists. The cuffs unlocked, leaving red marks on Marcus's wrists. He slowly rubbed them, but his eyes never left Brentwood. "So," Marcus said, his voice laced with sarcasm, "am I still a suspect?" No one answered. Dawson remained tense, clearly realizing the gravity of his mistake. Brentwood, however, clenched his jaw. "I was just following protocol." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Then perhaps you can explain which protocol requires handcuffing a senior government official without verifying his identity first?" Chen folded her arms, her sharp gaze cutting through Brentwood. "I'd like to hear the answer to that as well." Brentwood said nothing. The silence in the room stretched into an unbearable weight. "A full report on this incident will be on my desk within 2 hours," Chen ordered, her tone making it clear there was no room for negotiation. Brentwood, you will personally write a statement explaining why you failed to confirm Director Richardson's identity before taking action. Brentwood's lips pressed into a thin line, but after a moment, he gave a stiff nod. Chen turned to Marcus, her voice softening just slightly. Director Richardson, I sincerely apologize for this. This should never have happened. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Unlike Brentwood, her eyes held no defiance, no denial, only exhaustion and genuine remorse. I appreciate your apology, Marcus said, his tone measured. But I don't care about apologies. I care about action. Chen nodded. You have my word. I will do everything in my power to ensure this is handled appropriately. Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he gave Brentwood one last look. The man now avoiding eye contact, his bravado completely shattered, before stepping out of the room. But as he walked through that door, he knew this was far from over. Marcus stepped out of the interrogation room, his breath steady but heavy. The airport hallway remained crowded, but now the energy had shifted. The way people looked at him was different. No more curiosity, no more hushed whispers. Only heavy silence, the kind that comes when people witness injustice but don't know what to do about it. Some travelers still stared. Others glanced down at their phones. The video of him being handcuffed was likely already spreading. Chen walked beside him, her pace brisk, as if wanting to escape the chaos as quickly as possible. But Marcus didn't hurry. He walked slowly, head held high, making sure every single person saw him. Let them remember this moment. As they reached the main security checkpoint, Marcus stopped. Do you honestly believe an apology is enough? His voice was calm but razor sharp. Chen turned to face him, a flicker of tension in her eyes. I know it's not, she admitted. Marcus folded his arms. Then what are you going to do about it? Chen took a deep breath. Brentwood will be suspended immediately. I'll call for an internal investigation, and I promise you, this won't be ignored. Marcus let out a dry chuckle, but there was no humor in it. Internal investigation, he repeated, as if testing the bitterness of those words. We both know how those usually end. Chen didn't argue. What happened to me today, Marcus continued, wasn't an isolated incident. It happens to thousands of black travelers every day. The only difference is they don't have a title to hold the system accountable. Chen swallowed hard. I understand. No, Marcus said, shaking his head. You don't, but you will soon. He turned and walked away, leaving Chen standing frozen in place. She didn't try to stop him, because perhaps, for the first time, she realized that today wasn't just a bad day at the airport. It was the day the entire system had to face itself. Marcus stepped into the airport lounge and pulled out his phone. A flood of messages flashed across the screen. Texts from his wife, Elise, from his daughter, Layla, from close colleagues. But one notification caught his attention, a message from his assistant, Gabriela Rodriguez. Call me the moment you can. This thing is exploding. Marcus dialed. Gabriela picked up on the first ring. Where are you? Her voice was urgent. At the airport, Marcus replied. I just got released after being handcuffed. I'm guessing the whole country knows by now? More than that, Gabriela said. Do you realize your video hit 1 million views in just 30 minutes? It's everywhere. Twitter, CNN just picked it up, and wait. Marcus could hear her typing furiously in the background. MSNBC just ran a headline, Homeland Security Director detained at airport. Has America really changed? Can you believe this? Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the outrage rippling across the country. A part of him felt vindicated. Another part just felt exhausted. What about the White House? He asked. Radio silence so far, Gabriela responded. But there are rumors that the president has been briefed. You should brace yourself. This isn't just a PR crisis anymore. It's about to become a full-blown political issue. Marcus ended the call, but before he could even set his phone down, it buzzed again. James Washington. Marcus raised an eyebrow. James was not just his deputy at Homeland Security, he was also one of his closest friends. A former Marine, a seasoned government official, and a no-nonsense kind of man. James, Marcus answered, his voice low. Don't James me like this is a normal day, came the gruff response. Do you know who I just had to talk to? Let me guess, some important people? Important? James let out a dry chuckle. You just sent the entire White House into panic mode in under an hour. The president wants to see you, immediately. Marcus exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. He knew this moment was coming. Any way I can delay this? No, James was blunt. You have two choices. Either you walk into the White House right now, or you let them control the narrative without you. Marcus opened his eyes. His grip on the phone tightened. Fine, he said. I'm on my way. And with those words, he knew his battle had officially begun. The black SUV cut through the congested streets of Washington, D.C., heading toward 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Marcus sat in the back seat, his eyes fixed on the news updates flooding his screen. Homeland Security Chief handcuffed at airport, security concern or racial bias. Video of Marcus Richardson's detainment surpasses 5 million views in less than 2 hours. What's going on with U.S. airport security? Marcus shut off the screen and leaned back against the headrest. He knew exactly what awaited him. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about a national crisis, one that would force America to take a hard look at itself. The SUV slowed as they approached the White House entrance. A security officer pulled open the door. "Director Richardson, this way. The president is waiting for you." Marcus stepped out, straightened his tie, and walked toward the most powerful office in the country. Inside the Oval Office, President Wilson stood by the window, arms crossed, staring out at the south lawn. He turned as Marcus entered. "Sit," the president said, his tone firm. "No pleasantries, no small talk." Marcus lowered himself into a chair. Across from him, James Washington was already seated, his face unreadable. Next to him sat the Attorney General and the National Security Advisor. This wasn't just a meeting. It was an interrogation. The president sat down, tapping his fingers lightly against the polished wooden desk. "Do you know how many calls I've taken this morning?" Marcus didn't respond. He knew this wasn't the time to speak. Senators, governors, even some of my biggest campaign donors. Everyone wants to know how I plan to handle this. The president's gaze sharpened. "So tell me, Marcus, do we have a legitimate security issue here? Or is this just another case of racial profiling?" Marcus clenched his fists. "Mr. President, we do have a security issue, but it's not me. It's a system that has gone unchanged for far too long. A system that sees people like me as threats, no matter what position we hold." Silence fell over the room. The president leaned back in his chair, frowning in thought. The Attorney General broke the quiet first. "The problem is, this case is already being politicized. The right-wing media is calling you a race card player. The left is turning you into a symbol of resistance." Marcus inhaled deeply. He had known this was coming. "I don't care about politics," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I care about making sure this never happens again." The president studied him for a long moment. "What's your plan?" Marcus didn't blink. "I want a full-scale investigation into racial profiling in airport security. I want Officer Brentwood suspended immediately. And I want a complete overhaul of TSA procedures to ensure this doesn't happen again." The room went silent. Then the president let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. Not the kind that signaled amusement, but the kind that acknowledged there was no avoiding the inevitable. "Fine," he said. "Do it. But understand, you just started a war." Less than an hour after the meeting, the White House announced an official investigation into racial discrimination in airport security. Marcus walked out of the West Wing, his phone buzzing relentlessly. "You just blew up Washington. Fox News is calling you a traitor to national security. CNN says you're a hero for justice. I don't know whether to congratulate you or tell you to watch your back. Elise, be careful. We both know they won't let this slide." "Dad, I'm proud of you, but I'm also scared. Don't let them tear you down." Marcus stared at his daughter's message, a weight settling in his chest. She was right, they wouldn't let this slide. Less than 24 hours later, the counterattack began. David Chen, a senior official from the Transportation Security Administration, appeared on national television. "I think we need to ask an important question," Chen said, his expression carefully neutral. "Is Director Richardson using a personal experience to push his own agenda?" Marcus gritted his teeth as he watched the broadcast. "Airport security is a complex issue," Chen continued. "We cannot allow personal emotions to dictate national security policies." Marcus grabbed the remote and shut off the TV. This was the first strike. He picked up his phone and dialed Gabriella. "Schedule a press conference," he said. Gabriella hesitated. "Are you sure?" If you go after Chen publicly, this will escalate into a direct battle. Gabriella, Marcus said, we're already in a battle, and I don't back down. He sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and started writing his speech. He was no longer just the man who had been handcuffed at an airport. He was the man who was going to change the system. The Homeland Security briefing room was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed in rapid succession, microphones were adjusted, and every major network was live. Before Marcus was a sea of cameras, all waiting. He stood behind the podium, taking a slow, deep breath. Every word he was about to say would shape the future. Not just for him, but for the fight against systemic injustice. To his right, Gabriella stood firm, gripping her iPad, giving him a small, reassuring nod. To his left, James Washington stood with his arms crossed, his face unreadable, but his eyes sharp. Marcus placed both hands on the podium, lifted his gaze to the cameras, and spoke. Yesterday, I was handcuffed at Reagan National Airport, not because I was a threat, but because I was a black man in a suit. The briefing room fell into complete silence. I presented valid identification. Instead of verifying it, TSA officers chose to assume I was a fraud. They chose to shackle me in front of a crowded airport without once considering they might be wrong. Marcus paused, letting his words settle. I am not the only one. Every single day, thousands of people of color go through the same ordeal. Not because they've done something wrong, but because they look suspicious. A few reporters nodded, their pens scratching faster against their notepads. And now, as I speak out, there are people within this system who want this story to disappear. They call me a man exploiting a personal incident to push an agenda. So I ask, what agenda? Fairness, truth, justice. Marcus locked eyes with the cameras, his voice unwavering. I am not doing this for myself. I am doing this to ensure that anyone who walks into an American airport never has to fear being humiliated simply for looking different. This is not a fight against national security. This is a fight to improve national security. Because if a system can detain the Director of Homeland Security without cause, is it really keeping us safe? The room exploded with camera flashes and a flurry of questions from reporters. But before anyone could speak, Marcus raised a hand. So today, I'm officially launching a full-scale investigation into airport security procedures at all major airports nationwide. We will analyze 5 years' worth of random screenings, and I promise, those who have abused their power will be held accountable. The reporters scrambled to document every word. A female journalist shot up her hand. Director Richardson, do you have a response to David Chen's statement that you are politicizing security? Marcus's lips curled into a cold smile. Mr. Chen may believe this is political, but for me, it's personal. And for the millions who face discrimination daily, it's not politics, it's reality. Less than an hour later, David Chen was on Fox News, carefully composed, his tone measured and calculated. I fully support ensuring fairness in our security system, Chen said, his voice as smooth as a seasoned politician. But I am deeply concerned that Director Richardson's actions are weakening our ability to protect this country. The anchor nodded. What do you mean? Chen shook his head slowly, exhaling as if the burden of responsibility weighed heavily on him. When we begin placing too many restrictions on our security system, when we prioritize concerns over racial bias over actual safety, we risk making America vulnerable. Marcus watched the interview from his office, gripping the remote tightly. James Washington walked in, his expression grim. You need to respond, now. If you don't, they will control the narrative. Marcus nodded. He knew this was no longer just a media battle. This was a war over power. Gabriella entered, dropping a thick file onto his desk. You need to see this, she said. Marcus flipped it open, and what he saw sent a jolt of energy through him. Black travelers were 3 times more likely to be randomly screened than white travelers. Of over 10,000 security complaints filed in the past 3 years, 80% came from Black or Latino passengers.